Welcome back to Fulfillment Therapy. Today we have a special guest, Krista Naldjian, who is here with us, and she's going to talk to us about finances. And I've actually really wanted somebody to come on for a while to talk about this because I feel like I'm okay with this, but it's not my forte. And I know a lot of parents out there are struggling with the same thing. So we're excited to have you on, Krista. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and chat a little more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will give them a background about your bio for a second so they can kind of know who you are. But Krista is the founder of Money Mindful Moms, and that's a platform that encourages moms who want to pursue money goals without obsessing and without missing out on important family experiences. So she's a busy mom of 3 and married to her college sweetheart, and they're currently paying off their 6 figures of debt on a teacher's salary in a high-cost living area. And she said that one of her core beliefs is that moms with money skills will change the world. And she aims to be a small piece of that puzzle for moms who are in the thick of raising a family. Did I get that right, Krista?
Totally. That's it.
Awesome. Well, I'm, like I said, very excited to have you on the show today, just to pick your brain a little bit and not only help my listeners, but honestly help me a little bit. So we're so glad that you're here. Hey parents, welcome to Fulfillment Therapy. Do you want to raise your kids better and have a stronger marriage? Are you up late at night researching marriage and parenting tools and self-care tips? Do you start each day hoping for deeper connections and less chaos, but it ends with family arguments and going 12 different directions again? My name's Kendra, wife, mom, therapist, and growth enthusiast. It wasn't until I discovered how to fulfill my unmet needs that I was finally able to show up as my best self, as a spouse and parent. I realized that by meeting my needs, I could more fully meet the needs of my family with more energy and less resentment. In this podcast, I teach parents skills like boundary setting, prioritizing personal needs, communication, and claiming ownership. Just like my clients, you'll be shocked by the improvement in your marriage, parenting, and personal life when you focus on fulfilling your important unmet needs. Ready to prioritize yourself so you can quit mentally throat punching people? Then grab those earbuds and head outside, and let's walk and talk. Why don't you just tell me a little bit more about yourself? Like, what got you into finance in the first place? Like, why are you so excited about it?
Yeah. So it's kind of funny. Sometimes I'll get asked, like, was that what you studied in college? Was that what you always wanted to do? Absolutely not. 100% no. I'm more of a people person. I was actually a literature major, so I was not a numbers person. I loved books and words, and that was what I thought I would end up doing. And the way that it kind of came about was just through some mistakes that my husband and I made early on. And we found ourselves in a lot of debt, and we had young kids, and I kind of got to this point where I was like, something has to give. And so I started trying to figure it out on my own. And this was years ago. And so the information that was out there was very limited, and what was available just didn't hit with me. It didn't resonate because it was usually coming from the perspective of like a middle-aged man whose kids were grown, and it just felt so out of touch to me. I'm like, what about when I'm trying to, pay for diapers and all the things and not miss out on my kids' important milestones? Like, how do I do that? And so I just started piecing things together myself and just started sharing online. And I was very surprised with how many moms resonated with it because it's kind of a taboo topic. And so people don't, when you're hanging out with your friends, you don't just bring up finances and how is your debt payoff going? And so to hear from so many other moms that just by me sharing it kind of helped them or helped open them up to the idea of talking about it more and learning about it more. And so that's really how it got started, and it really snowballed from there. And like I said, numbers aren't my thing, but people are. And so this kind of became my way of being able to support moms because like I shared in the bio, I believe that moms with money skills will change the world, because when you feel confident as a mom with your finances, it changes how you show up in the world. You don't snap at your kids as much. You don't snap at your husband as much. And then you have the capacity or the ability to give to things that I think in the hands of moms, having the money and the accessibility, it just changes things in your community. So that's kind of how I got started and how it grew from there. But I'm just grateful that this wasn't on my radar, but I'm in the exact right space that I'm supposed to be.
I love so many things that you said about that. Like, it came about because of a mistake. And honestly, I think that's how so many of us really learn what our passion is and our purpose and our calling is by the things that we go through. Like, there's a thing that I mentioned on my podcast. It's find your wound, find your purpose. And we all have these different wounds, and yours sound like it very much taught you what you could do to help others. And I love how, even though you're talking about finance, it is very much in line with what I'm doing. I'm mental health and wellness, but truly holistic health is the only way that we can truly thrive and have that fulfillment that we're looking for. And you are doing that same thing, just in another realm. And I so much appreciate that there's people out there like you that are doing that. So that's exciting. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, for sure.
Before I ask you another question, I did want to speak to one other thing you said, and it's not from a middle-aged man. And I always followed Dave Ramsey, and I really like his stuff, but I do remember a close friend of mine saying something like that too. This isn't really exactly helping me in this current stage, and I have some different takes. Like, I wanted to address it in a different way too. And I'm like, oh, I never really thought about that. It sounds like that you were thinking in the same way as my friend a little bit.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
So, Krista, what are some simple or effective steps that busy parents can take to begin improving their financial situation? Because if they're anything like me, sometimes it just feels too big, right?
100%. Yeah. Sometimes I find that focusing on money goals just kind of gets put to the bottom of the to-do list continually. It's like that bag of clothes that you've been meaning to donate that's been sitting in your trunk forever. And you just keep, I'll get to it one day. I'll get to it one day. And I mean, it sounds so silly, but it's like, this is a bag of clothes versus your financial future. Like this is kind of a big deal. We got to move it off of the bottom of the to-do list, right? But I know that people are busy, and I get that. So a couple things that I always share with people, the very first step is to know your numbers, because so often people will assume they know their financial state or their financial status, but they've never actually dove into what their numbers are. How much do you have coming in? How much is going out? And where is it going? If you don't know that, that is like, do not pass go. Do not do anything else until you start there. And sometimes you might be pleasantly surprised as you think like, oh my gosh, I'm so far behind. But when you actually look at things, you go, well, wait a minute, there's actually more coming in than I thought, or there's actually less going out than I thought. I just need to kind of organize this a little bit, put everything in its place and have a plan in place. And I would be on track, right? So that's the first thing. And then the second thing that I think makes a huge difference is what I call focusing on the big boulders instead of the tiny little pebbles. And so what that means in terms of your finances is oftentimes when people have money goals, they will go towards those little pebbles first. Like, I'm going to stop going to Starbucks, or I'm going to cancel my Netflix subscription. And those things are great. I'm not saying that you don't want to take a look at those things, but those aren't really giving you a huge bang for your buck like the big boulders will. And the big boulders are typically your rent or mortgage, a car payment if you have one, food costs, and income is a big boulder too. Those are the things that if you start there, those are going to give you a bigger return on your time invested. And so if you have very limited time, what I see happen if people focus on the tiny little pebbles is they get burnt out, because they don't have a lot of time. And so the time they are spending isn't giving them very much of a return. They get through the whole month and they go, that was exhausting. I feel like I was scrambling to try to cancel things and figure things out, and it saved me maybe $50 this month or $100, instead of saying, I'll get to those eventually, but my first thing that I'm going to look at are those big boulders. Do I have a car payment? If so, how can I reduce it or get rid of it? Is moving a possibility to save on rent? What about my income? Can I go ask for a raise? Can I ask for extra hours? food costs. Let me really take a look at my grocery budget. Instead, those things will save you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, right? So really focusing in on those big boulders if time is a constraint for you, and then you'll get to the little things down the road, but start there.
Thank you for sharing that. So just to reiterate, it's know your numbers. So that's like income and expense. And number 2 is focus on the big boulders, which is your car payment or your groceries or your income. And that's a little bit different than what I've heard. I actually can't remember if this is Dave Ramsey thing, but like the snowball effect, start small. But I do like that approach too, because you are right. We do have limited bandwidth, especially as busy parents, to really figure out those bigger things first and put our energy where it's going to make the biggest impact. So I appreciate that. What are some common financial pitfalls that parents often encounter? Like you've worked with a lot of parents, it sounds like, and how can they avoid them?
So I would say probably the biggest thing is more of a mindset, and that is the idea that kids are expensive, right? Kids are expensive. And true, they are expensive. I've got 3 of them. I know that it costs a lot to raise kids, but I would also say kids are expensive, and being a parent has made me better with money. And so 2 things can be true at the same time, right? I have never been more on point with my finances than since I became a mom, because I have to, right? So I've never been better at making a dollar stretch. I've never been more conscious of my spending, where I'm spending, of what our future looks like, right? So yeah, kids are expensive, but like, let's not use that as an excuse or this sort of like blanket statement that because I have kids, that means that things are just expensive and I can't do anything about it. You can also choose to lean into that positive part of it, which is, hey, I can choose to use my kids as a reason to be on point with my finances like I never have been before. So for me, that's kind of like the biggest thing that I've seen. And then also too, just thinking that your kids need more than they do. That can be, from your own childhood, things that came up then and how your parents handled money and, maybe wanting to swing in the opposite direction. Sometimes I've seen that too, but it's just thinking your kids need more than they do. Like, what do they actually need from you versus what you're projecting that they need, all of these activities or clothes or toys or vacations, things like that.
There's something that I heard from somebody once, something like the first half of your life, you are acquiring things, and the second half of your life, you're getting rid of things. And I feel like I'm at that transition point where I'm like, yeah, we have invested so much money in stupid things. I have 4 children and an exchange student, so I have 5 kids living here. And your house fills with stuff, so much stuff every year. And as you're speaking to that, I'm like, yes, they don't need this many things. And if we were to like sit them down every year and be like, what did you actually enjoy that we purchased for you? I think it'd be very minimal, the things that they actually cared about.
100%. I mean, even think about, could they even name a gift that you got them for Christmas last year at this point? Probably not. But, at the time it seems so important, but time passes and then you realize, hey, maybe that wasn't as important as I thought. What are the things that actually matter to my kids more so than the dollar amount that I'm spending on them?
Definitely. I'm glad that you brought that up. And also just your comment about excuses. Like, we don't have to use our kids as an excuse to not dial things in. You can tell us if this is true, but I'm pretty sure it was also Dave Ramsey that said that 80% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, regardless of how much they make. And that's always stuck in my head. I did one of his courses, and it doesn't matter if you're a parent or not a parent. It doesn't matter if you're a CEO or whatever. Most of us are just not managing our money well, and we are making excuses.
Totally. The more money you make, it's called lifestyle creep, that your lifestyle will just creep up with that. And so, yeah, the plan is huge for that.
Yeah, I know a lot of my clients have talked about that. And I've seen that too. No matter how much of a raise we get in our job, we still seem to be in the same situation.
Mm-hmm.
How do you teach your kids healthy money habits from a young age as a parent, Krista?
I love this one because I think so often parents think that they're not equipped or they're not capable of teaching their kids about money because maybe their finances aren't looking so great or they never learned. And so they just kind of take this hands-off approach or think the school will teach their kids, which sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. And so I believe that you right now, no matter what your finances look like, you can teach your kids about money through some very simple things. So these are the couple of things that I typically recommend. And they're going to be silly simple, like silly simple things that you wouldn't have thought of. The first thing is bring your kids with you to the grocery store. And I don't mean every time. I know that it's so easy to just do the online grocery shopping and just store pickup or go without your kids. And I like to go without my kids too. But at least once a month, try to bring them with you to the grocery store. And the reason that I share that is because they learn through watching your example. And so if you're in the grocery store and you have a list and you tell them that you have a budget and they watch you putting things in the cart, adding things into a calculator, putting things back, they watch you go to the register and pay for it. And they're watching these transactions. They're watching the interactions that you're having. If you work from home and they can hear you make phone calls and hear you talk to clients, if you are going to the bank, bring them with you. These everyday situations that we know to just be part of our lives, that's not part of their life yet. And if we hold them back from those things because it's easier to not take them with us, those are the things that are going to teach them more than anything else about how to be an adult and operate with money, right? So just those everyday money transactions are so important. So take them with you. And then the second thing that I share is for anything that you don't feel equipped yet to teach your kids, like maybe investing feels very big for you and you don't know anything about it. Or for me, it was my oldest daughter was starting to get into middle school and I was starting to think about college and I didn't know much about student loans. Well, I knew just from what I took out that I didn't want her taking out this massive student loan. I didn't know much about grants, any of those things. And so what I did is I found a YouTube video that was on that topic. It was really informative. I watched it first so that I learned. And then I incentivized her like I would a chore and said, if you watch this video and then we have a chat afterwards, I'll pay you $5. And so you can do that with a video. You can do that with a book. You know, obviously vet it first to make sure it's reputable information. But once you've done that, if you don't feel equipped to teach it, find somebody that does at the library in a book form or in a video form and incentivize them. I would so much rather pay her $5 to do that because she learned so much about student loans from watching that video than to like go sweep my porch or something like that. You can do things with what you have, and then you can also seek out the resources for things that you don't have currently.
I really appreciate that you brought those things up because that's kind of my mindset too. Like some people think, oh, you're like bribing your kids, but it's like, are these principles or these things going to teach them something that far surpasses that $5, whatever it is? And yeah, we've done that for sure with books, with different things. And I've thought about the same thing, like something Peace University, that Dave Ramsey thing. And I was just thinking, this far surpasses anything that I've taken in high school. Why is this not like a required course for kids before they start their lives as an adult or any financial class? And then do more incentivizing around that instead of requiring things that they never use again. Like that drives me crazy. But yet we can do those things as a parent. And like you said, it doesn't have to be big. It can be YouTube videos. I'm sure you know about this, but even just talking about the growth, that if they even just save a little bit when they're a teenager and then how much it grows. I love that stuff. And I know my kids love that stuff. So just looking up YouTube videos about what it would take for them to be a millionaire at this time. And again, it's not about the money so much as it is about what kind of how you started out sharing. I didn't even speak to this a little bit, but you don't snap at your kids. You're able to give more because you're not so financially burdened and overwhelmed. And the grocery store part, I love that too. It makes me think like, oh, do I even do that? Because I really have tried many budgets and I kind of don't love them. I don't know that anyone loves them.
Yeah.
And yet we live in this indulgent culture that doesn't have a lot of boundaries. And I see that all the time in mental health. But this is exactly what you're talking about here is in finances, we also have to have boundaries and parameters if we really want to thrive.
Yeah. And you know what made me think about the grocery store thing initially was during the pandemic when kids weren't really going into grocery stores. And I started seeing all these like social media funny videos about taking their toddler into the grocery store for the first time. And I'm like, oh my gosh, think about that. Like if kids never went to these places with us, my parents drug us everywhere. Like we had to go anywhere that they went, we had to go with them. And so I got to see all of those interactions. But if our kids aren't seeing that, how do they learn those things? So I know that in today's world, there's so many ways that you can do things in a more convenient way. And I get that and utilize those things, but also try to sprinkle in those opportunities to teach them just by them tagging along with you.
Absolutely. I love that. So if you could share like a mantra or a guiding principle that you personally live by when it comes to financial wellness, what would that be? Because you have a lot of information that I wish I could just absorb into my mind. But anything that you could say that would help us.
Yeah, this is, I think, specific to moms. And my biggest thing that I have to repeat to myself and I share with clients all the time is, as the mom, I get to set the tone. I get to set the tone of what this looks like. And so I know that, let's say you're in a tough financial spot and you're really trying to dig yourself out of a hole. It can feel frustrating that you have to say no to more things. It can be frustrating that maybe you can't take the vacation. But if you can say, okay, I know this is hard, but as the mom, I get to set the tone of what this looks like to my family. And so let's say you can't take the summer vacation this year. You setting the tone looks like, hey, we're going to do the most epic staycation that you could ever imagine. We're going to stay in town. We're going to go to all the splash pads and we're going to have picnics, and you sell that to your family with the most possible enthusiasm. You are setting the tone for your family that this doesn't have to be this, terrible thing. It's not. I mean, truly, it's not, right? And so you setting the tone is so important. And even down to, I think of holidays, sometimes we get in this comparison when we see other moms that are giving tons of gifts, or, maybe they make even small holidays a big deal with, big gifts and everything. You get to set the tone as a mom. If you want that to be the tone, then go for it. But if you don't want that to be the tone from the beginning, you're just kind of setting the standard of what it looks like for your family. Maybe Christmas isn't tons of gifts. I came from a family where the living room was covered with gifts. And as an adult, I wanted to change that. I didn't want that to be what Christmas was about. And so I decided from the beginning of how I'm setting the tone with my family of what this looks like. It doesn't make hers wrong or mine right. It's just, you get to decide. And my kids don't know any different. Does that make sense? Like, my kids know nothing different other than this is how we do it. So they don't feel like they're missing out because this is just how we set the tone for them.
I love how you spoke to that. One isn't right, one isn't wrong, but just intentionally creating that how you want to. And I love how you talked about like the attitude or setting the tone for the family. Like, it's often important for you to show your children that sacrifice is worth it because it leads to something even better. That's our role as parents, is to show them that, instead of just this passive, I talk about this all the time, like a zombie-like attitude where we're just going through the motions, we're being complacent, we're not living intentionally, because that does not lead anywhere that gives us true joy. So you're very much speaking to that with finances.
Totally.
So in your experience, what are some of the most impactful lessons that your clients have learned from working with you regarding finances? Because I know this can be really transformative in people's lives.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I often hear is how surprised they were with how little judgment there was around anything. And that we look at numbers simply to collect data, and it means nothing about who you are. And I think people come into it probably feeling like they're beating themselves up a little bit, that they have gotten to this place where they kind of are like, I surrender, I need help with this. And they're expecting there to be some sort of like coming down on them. And that's just not what it is. We collect the numbers, we figure everything out, but then we kind of shift into solution mode pretty quickly. And it's not something that you need to take up the mental energy of worrying about, oh gosh, like she's going to judge me or anyone is going to judge me for this. We kind of just move into solution mode really quickly. That's been the biggest thing that I've heard over and over again from people.
That, again, reminds me of my space. It's just very much solution focused. And it is about like, okay, we need to do some sort of assessment. Like, that's important to finding your baseline or where you are at so that we can grow. And then we can compare those numbers. And yeah, so with mental health and wellness, whatever it is, and finances, it sounds like that's really important, but you don't have to attach judgment there. And I really appreciate you speaking to that. I'm also wondering if you could share a personal experience where you've seen significant positive changes either in your life or someone else's, where they were really able to improve their financial situation.
I have a client that's coming to my mind named Christy. And when Christy came to me, her goal was that she wanted to buy a house because her oldest son was getting older and he was going to be going off to college. And she wanted him to have a home base to come home to. You know, we think of certain milestones and hers was so specific to her. That was like her thing. And so we got a plan in place and she worked with me for a little while and then she was kind of off on her own doing, following the plan that we had set up. And I got this voice message from her about a year later, so excited that they bought a house. And it was just such a reminder to me that when she came to me a year before, she felt like it was so far away. It was this goal that she had, but it was so far in the distance. And I think your goals with your finances are so much closer than you think that they are. But again, it's coming back to, do I know my numbers so that I can formulate a plan based on the goal that I have? So that's what she did. And a year later, she was able to buy that house. So that was probably the biggest win for me, is hearing the excitement in her voice from that voice message that she did it. That's really what it is for most people, is you are a lot closer than you think that you are.
That's so powerful. I love that story. And just like so many other ones too, it's really about making those intentional goals, because what you want is closer than you think. Like, we always think, well, that's so far ahead. There's no way I'm getting there. And yet it just takes small, tiny steps and you're there faster than you think. I just have one more question for you. And this kind of ties it back to fulfillment, because I'm very passionate about that. I'm curious, how do you create greater fulfillment in your own life?
This is such a great question. I'm approaching 40. So my 40th birthday is this summer. And I feel like this has been like a pursuit of mine for probably the past decade. And I think where I'm at right now, and this could change a month from now, a year from now, who knows, but is just being okay with zeroing in on those really important things to me and not feeling like I have to be chasing perfection in every area of my life. And I am good at some things and not the greatest at others. And it's okay for me to lay those down. So I read this quote from Bob Goff, and he said that I used to be afraid of failing at something that really mattered to me, but now I'm more afraid of succeeding at things that don't matter. And I feel like that just kind of sums up where I'm at with things, of just really focusing on the things that do matter and not chasing the things that don't matter to me right now.
I really appreciate that you shared that quote. I've never heard that before, and I really love that. Be more afraid of succeeding at things that don't matter. Because I think we waste our lives in the pursuit of things that are not really noteworthy, that aren't going to bring us that lasting fulfillment and true joy, and focusing instead on that. That is so beautiful. I really appreciate you bringing that here. And just to kind of reiterate some of the things that you said, I love that you have this solution-focused approach, and that we can too, instead of just focusing on all those shadows. And remembering that our dreams, especially if we are proactive, I would say definitely if you're proactive, are closer than you think. And really focusing on those two things that you said, know your numbers and focus on those big boulders. Just wonderful advice for us today and our listeners. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing that. Also, Krista, where can we find you?
Oh, yeah. So I am mostly over on Instagram, and I have a podcast. So I do have a couple other things, but honestly, they get a little neglected. So if you want the best stuff, it's going to be on my podcast, which you can just search Money Mindful Moms wherever you listen to podcasts. And then Instagram is also Money Mindful Moms. I share a lot there as well. I also have a freebie for Debt Payoff Get Started guide. So if you're somebody who's really wanting to start paying off debt, you can find that over on my Instagram in the link in my bio there to get started.
Awesome. I love that. And I will put that in the show notes. So if you want to see all of her information or find her, go ahead and check out our show notes for today's episode. And again, thank you so much, Krista, for coming on and sharing your insights with us. I really think it's going to help not only listeners, but myself as well. So I appreciate it.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you for having me on. This was really fun. And I hope that even if it was just one little tidbit that people can take away and implement, it was worth it. So thank you.
Hey friends, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, chances are someone else would too. Would you take 30 seconds to share this with a friend who's looking for greater family fulfillment? And while you're sharing, tell me what you think about the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. It refuels me when I hear this podcast is helping you. No matter what your house or your hair looks like, I'll meet you back here every Monday and Thursday morning for more episodes. Until then.